Hello everybody and welcome back to another Blender Made Easy tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a fireball in Blender. So we're going to be using the smoke simulation and the fire simulation to create this effect. I'll show an image on screen of what the end result will look like. Alright, so let's get started and delete this cube. So press X and delete it. Then I'm going to press Shift A, we're going to go to Mesh and UV Sphere. This is going to be our emitter and our fire and all that sort of stuff. So first off, I want to do a little bit of animating before we add in the domain and all that stuff. So go into front view, then 5 to go into orthographic view, and we'll place it over here. So I'm going to have it go across the screen and then rotate while it's doing that. So press I, location, rotation. Then I'm going to change it to frame 20 right here, and I want to make sure the end frame is set to frame 30, so make sure both of these. And there's a shortcut that I found out recently. If you hover over this and press home, it'll expand this like that and fit your entire screen. So then press G, and move it over here, and then rotate it a little bit, double tap R to give it a random rotation, then hit I, location, rotation. So let's play this and see what it looks like. There we go. Another thing that we want to make sure is we want to come over here and go over to here and click on Graph Editor. Now, if we look at this, they're curves. And what that means, if you don't know what curves are in graph editing and animation, what it means is it goes slow at first, then speeds up, then it slows down. So slow, fast, and then slows down at the end. I don't want that. I want to make sure it's a straight, just without slowing down, without anything. I want to make sure it's linear. To change this, press T and click on linear. Now they're all straight. So if I press Alt A, it goes all the way and stops immediately without slowing down or anything like that. And that's exactly what I want. Okay, so close off the graph editor. We're not going to need it anymore. Now let's add in the smoke and get into the simulating. Alright, so let's come over to Object, go to Quick Effects, and Quick Smoke. So here, if we press Alt A, it's not going to work. It goes right out of the domain. So that's pretty bad. We want to make sure that this is expanded. So drop this down and hold on. Make sure you're in wireframe. For some reason, even though I'm in solid view, it changes everything to wireframe, and so it looks like it's in wireframe, but it's technically not. So make sure you're in wireframe over here, then box select it and drag it down, then box select over here and drag this across. Then press Alt A and we'll see, we want to make sure this is a little bit smaller, or a little bit bigger, and we'll drag this out this way. Then we'll press Alt A one more time, and there we can see it. I'll drag this down just a little bit. We want to make sure that the domain is as small as it can be. I'll scale it up along the Y as well, because once we do the baking, it's going to calculate everything and all that stuff. So now let's get into the simulating. So we'll do this one first. So come over to the Physics tab, and then I'll show you guys what all this stuff does. So first off, I want to change this to fire. We don't want to do fire and smoke. That might be deceiving because you might think that it's just going to be fire. But Blender actually emits smoke. Even though it's set to fire, it does both of them. If you set it to fire and smoke, it does a lot of smoke, and you don't want that. So make sure it's just set to fire. Now let's press Alt A, and there we can see, you can also see there's smoke right there. Okay, so let's talk about these settings. The surface, this is like a force field around the object. If you set it to a really high number, it's going to be really big. So something crazy like 5, you can see it's a huge fireball. That's not what I want. I'm going to set it back to 1. I think it was at 1.5. I'm going to set it to 1 and then press Alt A, and we can see what it looks like. So that's pretty cool already, but there's a lot more stuff that we can do to make it look even more better. You can use a texture. I'm not going to do that. I'll show you guys what it looks like though. So I'll click here, click on texture, and then come over here and change it to the text, and then I'll change it to clouds. And if we bring the size down and we come over here, bring the contrast up a little bit, maybe the brightness down, we can see that it looks pretty cool. Actually, you know, I'll leave that. So what I did there is I set the size really low, and I set the brightness lower, and then the contrast up. So it gives it more of a sporadic, crazy sort of look. So if we go back and play this, we can see that's what it looks like. Very cool. All right, go back to the Physics tab, and now let's right click on our domain. This is where we set all the settings up and make it look really realistic. So first off, let's talk about the resolution and the density and all this stuff. the divisions, this is just basically how good it looks. For my final scene, I did like 128, and that's pretty good. You can do like 64, that will look fine. But for this tutorial, I think we'll stick with like 100 or so. The temperature difference, if we hover over this, you can see how much density affects the smoke. Higher values result in faster rising smoke. So if you set it to a higher value, the smoke will go up faster. The temperature difference, this is it's like another way for the smoke to affect and how fast it rises, stuff like that. The vorticity, this is like the swirls and how crazy it looks. So I want to make sure this is set to a high number of 4. That's as high as you can go. You can't go any higher than 4. So let's play this again and I'll show you guys what it looks like. There we go. So you can see it's a lot more like crazy looking, and I think it looks a lot better. Okay, smoke flames. Here is where we can set how much smoke affects, how much smoke there is in our scene and all that sort of stuff. So I'll leave the vorticity at 0.5, and also here we can set the color, so we can set it to like a blue smoke color, something like that. That looks pretty funny. I'm gonna set it back to just gray for now. And the speed, this is how this, I'll show you guys what this does. So I'll set it to a value of 2, and I'll play this. So you can see that the fire is not that high, and that's because this is a high number. I'm going to set it back to 0.75. If you want higher flames, you want to set this speed to a lower value. So I'm going to set it to 0.1 right here, and then play it again, and you can see that the fire is really, really high. Look at that. You can see how it's crazy. So I'm going to set this back to 0.7. That's the value that I want, 0.7. The smoke, this is how much smoke is in our scene. And let's play this and see how much smoke there is. So that looks pretty good. I think I might want a little bit more smoke. So let's go 1.2. And we'll play this one more time. That looks pretty good to me. All right, so let's close that off. And now let's talk about the smoke adaptive domain. So right now, Blender is baking in the entire domain, and I don't really want that. I want to make sure that it's adaptive. And what adaptive means, if I play it, you can see that there's like a box that appears in our scene, and it follows the smoke and follows the fire. That looks pretty good. We want to make sure this is checked because Blender, once you actually do the baking, it will bake the entire domain. If you turn this on, it will only bake what's inside that smaller box. Good. High resolution smoke, you want to make sure this is checked, and you also want to make sure the divisions is set to 2 once you do the final baking, because it'll make it look much better. And as you can see, just from checking it, it makes it look so much better. So check it, and then we'll play it. Nice. All right, so we'll close it off for now. Once we do the baking, I'll turn it back up. Now let's come down to the field weights. That's good. Okay, so I think we're ready to do a bake actually. So we'll turn this up to 2. And you know what? I'll talk about this real quick. The FTB and wavelet, there's not much of a difference between these two. This is just how the noise affects the fire and makes it look sort of like wavy, and it's hard to explain. I don't really know exactly. I'll show an image on screen of that I found on the Blender manual where you can see the differences between wavelet and FFT. The strength right here, we'll just leave it at 2 for now. It doesn't really matter. Yeah, so let's come up here and we'll set it to a value of 100 on the divisions, and then make sure you save your project. If you come down here and you try to bake it and it's grayed out, that's because you haven't saved. So press Ctrl S and save it to wherever you want. I'll just call it Fireball Tutorial 2 because I've already tried to record this and it didn't work that great. So it's 2. Okay, so here, set this to a value of 30, the end frame, because we don't want to bake in 250 frames. That's just crazy. So make sure it's set to 30, and then save your project and hit bake. So this should not take too long. It's only 30 frames, so it should go pretty fast. If you set this to a higher resolution, it's going to go a lot slower. So I'll pause the video until it's done. Okay, the baking has finished, and now we can see our result. So I'm going to scroll through this, and we can see exactly what it looks like. Look at that. That looks pretty sweet. So I'll position the camera right in front view. So hit Ctrl-Alt-0 to snap the camera. I'll right click on it. I'll drag it out, and then I'll rotate it a little bit, give it some cool effect like this. And I'll make sure that it's like down here or so it looks like it came into the camera view and there's not just like empty smoke right there. So make sure it's something like this. All right, so let's press Shift to Z and nothing's there. That's because we haven't set the material yet. So let's come over to the material tab and I'll show you guys all the stuff over there. So go to the node editor, then press N to close it off, right click on your domain, and here we can see the material. And since we did the quick effect, right here, quick effects, quick smoke, it already adds in the material and it looks really good. All right, let's talk about the smoke material. So here we have the density, and if we change this value, this is how thick the smoke will look. So I'll just set it to something crazy like 50, and I'll show you guys exactly what that looks like. You can see the smoke is really, really thick. That is not what I want. So I'm gonna set it back to 5. We might wanna even go to like 7. So give it a little bit thicker smoke. So here, the density, this attribute, this corresponds with the stuff over here. If we set this to higher values, the density will affect the material, and it just goes back and forth. This color attribute node, down here, where is it at? The smoke flames or something, where is it? Yeah, smoke flames. The smoke color that we set here, this is with this. So if we set it to a blue color, it's gonna be blue. Technically, we don't really need this, so we could like delete it. I'll just get rid of those. We could change this to like blue, something like this. You can see that the color is changing, but that's not what I want, so I'll drag it back into the color. We can just leave it for now. It's not a big deal. If you're wondering how you add in the flames, well, that's pretty easy. All we need to do is Shift D, this attribute node, and then change this to flame. Make sure you spell this right. If you don't spell this right, it's not gonna work. Then press Shift A, we're gonna add in a color ramp right here, color ramp. Then I'm gonna press Shift A, we're gonna add in a converter math node. Then press Shift A, we're gonna add in a shader and emission shader, and then plug it into this add shader. It's really handy because this quick effects knows, the person who developed it knows that sometimes you're gonna wanna add fire, so he added this add shader for us to easily plug it into. All right, that looks weird. So here we want to take the factor input, plug it into here, and then take this color input and plug it into the color of the emission. In there we can see our flames. Then we want to take this factor input, plug it into this value, in the top value, and change it to multiply. Then set this value to a value of like 20 and take it to the strength. So this is what controls the strength. You can see that there's white and black, and I think that looks pretty cool actually. This value here controls how bright and how like just big it looks. Here is the color, so we can set this to any color that we want. I'm gonna press the plus button, and then we'll change the color to like reddish, something like this. And I'll drag the black this way a little bit, and I'll drag the red this way. Then I'll press the plus button, and I'll drag this over here, and I'll change this to a orange, something like this. You can see that's already starting to look like fire, but it's not that great. So we'll play around with the strength a little bit, trying to get exactly what we're looking for. Something like that. I think the red is a little bit crazy, so I'll click this and I'll drag it this way a little bit. There you go. I think that looks a little bit better. So you can set it to any color that you want. You could have like a blue fireball or something cool like that. Play around with it, do whatever you want with it. This is Blender, you can create literally anything. All right, that looks good. So now right click on our UV sphere and we'll set a new material for here because currently there's no material. I'll set the diffuse to just an emission shader. So press Shift A, we'll add in a, where is it at? Shader and emission right here. You could leave it at black, that kind of looks cool, but I'm gonna set it to here. And the strength, we'll first change the color. So try to match the color that you set for the fire itself. So something like that. And then I'll change the strength to like 5. No, that's too crazy. Let's go 2. 2 looks pretty good. Great. So now I'm gonna close this off. That looks good. Now let's come over to the world and we'll change it to just a dark blackish material. You don't wanna go fully black, but somewhere around here, because I do wanna see the smoke. That looks good. All right, now let's work on the particles or the little sparks that are going to be flying off the UV sphere and then following the smoke. To do this, right click on our UV sphere, go to the particle system and click new. So currently if we play this, we can see that the particles are just kind of flying off. They're not really doing anything. We want to make sure that they follow the smoke trail. So to do this, I'm going to press Shift A. We're going to add in a force field and smoke flow. I'm going to position it just right about here. I don't think it matters where this is positioned. Don't quote me on that though. I'm not exactly sure. Let's change this value to 5 on the strength and the physics. And then we'll press Alt A, and it's not really working. So maybe turn up the strength a little bit more. Alt A. Why is it not working? Oh, I know why it's not working. It's because we set the gravity is really high. So come down to the field weights, set the gravity to a value of like 0.1, then press Alt A, and there we can see they're following the smoke a little bit better. So let's just position this where we want. Frame 18, that looks pretty cool. Maybe 17? Yeah, let's go with frame 17. This is the one that will render. Currently, these particles are just little dots in space, so we want to have them actually be something. So I'm going to press Shift A, we're going to go to Mesh and UV Sphere. Now before you do anything, I want to make sure that we change these values here because there's going to be a lot of particles. We don't want them to be really high poly. So change it to 8 and change the rings to 5. So they're pretty low poly, but it's not super low that it's noticeable. So drag that over here, and now we're going to do the material for this. So I've tried to record this tutorial and the material didn't work as it did before with my practice run. So we're just kind of gonna wing it and see, and hopefully it will work. So press Shift A. What I did is that I added a particle info node. Then I press Shift A. We're gonna go to Converter Vector Math. Then I'm gonna press Shift A. We're gonna go to Math node and a color ramp and an emission shader. So go Converter, color ramp, and then lastly shader, emission right here, and plug this input into this. Take the color input, plug it into the color, take this value, plug it into here, change it to multiply, and then take this value, plug it into here, and then these values here, the velocity, that's what I did with my practice run, and it did work, but for the recorded tutorial, it didn't work, so we're just gonna see which one works. So change it to velocity, and then we're gonna change this to dot product. And I've tried messing around with these. I found that dot product is the one that works the best, and it gives the most variation with the color ramp. This value right here, if we press Shift to Z, we can see what they look like. You can't really see anything, and that's because we haven't set it up yet. So right click on our UV sphere, come down to the object and set it to the UV sphere that we created here, UV sphere ... 1. There we go. Now change the size so they're smaller, and then change the random size up just a little bit so it gives it some sizes. There's some bigger, some smaller, stuff like that. Then I'll press Shift Z. That looks pretty cool. All right. Yeah, so we're good here. Now let's mess with the material. So press Z twice, right click on our particle, and then I'll press Shift B, and I'll just draw a box around here so we can see the particles. This color ramp is the color of the particles. So we can set this value, this black color, to something like this, right about here probably. Then we will set this white value to a kind of tannish, hold on, let me select the white. Come on, computer. Let me just Z twice to get rid of that. Okay, right here, we'll set this value to this, and actually I think this value needs to be more of a reddish color. So then press Shift Z to see what this looks like. So there's not a lot of variation, so I think what we need to do is set, man, it's really slow, and I have a good computer, it's really slow. Maybe we'll change this location to here, and then this location to there, and then press Shift Z. There's still not a lot of variation. See, this is why it doesn't work sometimes. I've done this twice now and the location worked, but now it's not working. Okay, so after some testing, I figured out that, I'll just controls, there we go. I figured out that location goes into the dot product, then it goes into a multiply with a value of 0.1, then it goes into this color ramp with these colors right here. The color ramp goes into an emission shader, and then it goes into the surface output, and that gives us the different colors. So I'm just gonna hide the the domain and then press Shift Z, and you can see that there's some red ones, there's some whiter ones over there, and there's some lighter ones over here. There we go. We did it. Okay. Alt H, there we go, to bring back the domain. Now, let's close that off and press Shift Z on the entire scene and see exactly what it looks like. So that looks pretty cool. We're going to do a quick render, but I want to make sure there's some motion blur added to this. So go over to here, click on motion blur, and I think this is good. We'll do a quick render and see exactly what it looks like. Save your project, render. This should not take too long. I'm on my GPU right now. It looks like the motion blur is pretty crazy, so we might want to turn that down. Okay, so after some testing, the motion blur just stopped working. I don't know why. I set it to 0.5, but then it just stopped working and there's like no motion blur anymore. I found that this option's a little bit buggy when doing particles, I guess, so I'm just gonna leave it off. And then in Photoshop, there is a way to do that, and I'll show you guys at the end of this tutorial if you wanna add some motion blur in Photoshop. But there we go, guys. That is the tutorial. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, or if you made something cool with this tutorial, if you added blue fire or anything like that, I would love to see it. So make sure you post it on Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff, and tag me in it. I'll be sure to like it. Okay, guys, I'm going to be showing you how to add motion blur to the particles on your fireball. Right click on this, convert it to a smart object, so then we can add some filters and then mask it out. So then come up to filter and go over to blur and motion blur. Here we want to make sure that this is the angle of the fireball. We don't want to have something like this because that's not going to look right. So make sure the angle is with the fireball, something around here. So that looks pretty good. And the distance of 8 I found is pretty good for it. Then click OK. Then right click, or then click on your mask, and then zoom in here and just mask out the fireball and leave the particles. Very simple. So press X to go over to black, then just paint over the top, just like this. Very simple and very easy, and not too hard at all. Try not to grab any particles because that's not going to look that right. Something like this looks pretty good. Then zoom in and just for finer detail, click on the particles like this, change it to white, and then just click right there, click here, click a little bit there, something like that. And there we go. Boom. Boom. Right here, there's a particle there, 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 there. Very simple and very easy. Then zoom out, and there you can see it, and that looks pretty cool. So there you go, guys. That is how you add motion blur in Photoshop. Very simple and very easy. Hope you enjoyed. And make sure if you made a cool image, comment down below, link it to me, and I'd love to see it. So thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial.